famed Washington Post columnist Sally Quinn has touched on a lot of topics in her day: politics, style, religion, and how it has shaped her life. In 1973, Quinn became the first female anchor of the CBS Morning News. She was also married to the late, great Ben Bradlee, legendary editor of the Washington Post from the mid-'60s to the early '90s. In her latest book, Finding Magic, a Spiritual Memoir, she details her relationship with Bradlee and with religion, from voodoo lessons as a kid to her family of Presbyterians and psychics. Sally Quinn joins me now. Sally, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. So you go from a devout atheist, if that's not oxymoronic, to telling us about your spiritual awakening with On Faith, your famous website, in between. Is this the story of a woman who doesn't know what she wants, or a woman who's been on a lifelong journey?
Well, certainly the latter.
Okay. Well, tell me how.
Well, I became an atheist when I was 4, and I saw photos that my father had taken at Dachau when he liberated Dachau, the German concentration camp, and I realized that there couldn't be a God.
4? At
age 4. I stopped believing in God. I learned the word atheist when I was 13, and I realized that I wasn't alone. And so I was an atheist most of my life, and actually until I started a religion website at the Washington Post 11 years ago.
An atheist starting a religion website?
Yes, and my husband was more shocked than anybody. I can only tell you that. But I did it as a journalist because I thought that religion was a huge issue, both not only for political reasons but also foreign policy. I mean, it was something that was extremely important.
So what was the tipping
point?
It.
Well, the tipping point was this time that I spent studying religion after I started the website, which was purely professional journalism, and studying religion and traveling around the world and learning about religions, and also then going back to the fact that I had had a child who was born with a heart defect and had almost died and is learning disabled, and then watching my parents die, and then the turning point was really Ben, when Ben got dementia, when he was diagnosed 8 years before he died, and he died at 93. And in the last 2 years, taking care of Ben was, as awful as it was probably the most spiritual thing I ever did. And we were happier in our marriage together than we'd ever been. And I suddenly thought, there's something, whatever it is, whether you want to call it God or Allah or Buddha or whatever, there's something there.
Can we go back to you being 4 years old? Early in the book you described seeing those photographs your father brought home, and you ask a little girl's version of how can a loving God allow this to happen. Can you answer the question now?
Well, this is the problem with religion, with organized religion, and I do not believe in a personal God because, and certainly it's part of that, part of the suffering I saw in those photographs, and also, in being in the hospital in Tokyo when my father was in Korea and seeing all the wounded soldiers come into this hospital. It's called theodicy, which is the issue of suffering in religion, and I have interviewed thousands of people about their faith, and to this day, no one has ever been able to give me a decent answer about why there is suffering if there is an all-loving, omniscient, and omnipotent God.
You know, I'm trying to juxtapose that serious answer to a serious question with the fact that I read that you have put a hex on 3 people and believe that 2 people died as a result.
Three.
3 died? Do you worry that you're going to be seen as a crackpot after all these years?
You know, you get to a point in your life.
Do you really believe that, by the way? Do you believe those people died because of the hex?
No, of course not.
Oh, you do? Okay, fine.
No,
I want to be
I
clear.
don't.
Okay, fine.
And, hex is I'm from the South, deep South.
I know that.
And this is where I picked up all of this sort of culture of voodoo and psychic phenomena and, tarot cards and all of that. And my mother and my aunt, they all believed in this. So this was kind of like my embedded religion, something that I believed. Hex is just it's a word that can be a spell, and it can be a good hex or a bad hex. It can also be a wish or a prayer. And so, I mean, you wish somebody ill. If you wish somebody who's running for office that you don't like, or someone who's in the White House that you don't like, you might want to wish them ill.
Well, I had a lot of tough questions, but I crossed them out after I read that particular section. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't intellectually believe that, but I also don't. I didn't wish them dead. I just wish that.
Them ill.
I was wished that they had suffered the same thing the pain that they caused me.
But they are dead.
Which was that they did die.
Okay,
this is
fine.
true. And my husband and my friends all think this is ridiculous. Although when Ben would get pissed off at somebody, he would say, "Go get him, Sal."
Speaking of Ben, obviously most people know him from shepherding the Watergate investigation through. It's 2017. Shades of for you or no?
Watergate? Oh, this is worse than Watergate.
Why is it worse than Watergate?
Well, I think for one thing, Watergate was a national problem. This involves an adversary, a foreign adversary, an enemy. So that I think if there was any collusion, that you're talking about treason, and that's a whole different issue. And I think also with Nixon, as loathsome as he was in many ways, he was brilliant in many ways. I mean, he had been a senator, he'd been a vice president, he was very smart about foreign policy.
And Donald Trump?
And Donald Trump, he's inexperienced for one thing. But I also think, I mean, Nixon was dishonest, certainly in his own way. But I think that Trump, you can't trust him. I mean, he has no experience, and so that's really frightening because he campaigned on the idea of not adhering to sort of any beliefs of any kind. So he has no ideology. So you have no idea whether tomorrow morning he's going to push the button and blow up Korea.
That's true. Total destruction. Speaking of Richard Nixon, I love the Kissinger quote, which I can't believe I've never heard before. He's talking about the Post-gossip columnist. She makes me want to commit murder. Sally Quinn, on the other hand, makes me want to commit suicide. And the next line says, Ben was thrilled. Why was Ben Bradlee thrilled with that?
Oh, well, he was thrilled because the fact was that I would do these profiles that people would read, and nobody ever said that I misquoted them. What I would do is I would interview them. They would tell me their story. I would write it down. And sometimes they didn't like what they said. And they would get upset.
And he thought it was a badge of honor. I mentioned your short-lived career as the first woman anchor on the CBS Morning News. 45 years later, when you turn on television and see women in cocktail dresses with cleavage showing on the evening news, do you say to yourself, 2 steps forward, 1 step back? What do you say about what's happened? I mean, there are a ton more women on television, which is obviously a good thing. But what do you think of that development, the sort of sex
it depends
selling?
on what network and what show you're watching. I mean, there are some women in cleavages, but not most of the people I know, not most of my friends. And I think that actually there are probably more women on television today now than there ever have been.
I'm sure that's
true.
true.
And they're taken as seriously as the men are. So I think there's been enormous progress.
Last thing, you mentioned earlier taking care of your husband and the connection both to some spiritual thing and Ben Bradlee as he was suffering from dementia. Is there a lesson you have for people at home who are experiencing the same thing with someone they love? What's the takeaway?
Yes, I think it's about meaning. What's the meaning of your life? Ultimately, that's what my book is about, and that's what I discovered, and that's the message of my book, is that, you can't search for happiness to find meaning. You have to search for meaning to find happiness. And I found meaning in taking care of Ben, and that was magic for me.
Beautifully put. It's great to meet you, Sally Quinn.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your book.
Thank
Thanks
you
so much. Again, the book is Finding Magic, a Spiritual Memoir.